Hey everybody, welcome to Cowboy Criminology. I'm Derek Judd, I'm your host, and of course I am the Cowboy Criminologist. So happy 4th of July for those of you here in America celebrating our independence and just just able to enjoy all the freedoms that our country affords us. And uh, I can't speak for everybody else, but I know how grateful I am and how blessed I am to be able to call America my own. So, a couple of things. Video posts have been a little scarce over the last couple of weeks. There's been some major developments. If you haven't seen, I got accepted into my first choice law school. So, trying to coordinate the start of that with a doctor's appointment I can't miss, and of course, the logistics of getting to and from one thing or another, just leading to some time management issues that I just I need to get a little stability in order to overcome that, but I think we're on the right track with that. So I want to start off with thanking KTZ. She found my channel kind of by accident while she was doing research for a video on her channel. She was actually going to do a live stream with KFAR about Levi Smith, the attorney who tried to break into the woman's home. And of course, when law enforcement found him, he had a complete raid kit. We talked about that a little bit. And Katie said that she had been binging my channel, which is awesome. And I appreciate the shout out last night in your podcast or in your live cast with KFAR. That was wonderful. Erica, I want to thank you for joining. Erica joined as a recommendation off of Katie, and that's how these small channels grow. Last week, Larry sent me a message, which was kind of out of left field, but it's a great topic. And considering the number of these officers that we've lost over the last 6 weeks or so, I think it's worth doing a story about. So the question was, a canine dog is 100% legal law enforcement officer. Yes, they are certified and they are recognized as peace officers. As a matter of fact, there's a story that had floated around a couple of years ago about an officer named Peaches. Now, Peaches is a canine officer, dual trained, dual purpose dog. Peaches' job was narcotics detection and patrol, which means that they are capable of subduing a suspect by biting them, taking them down, and maintaining control of them. And apparently somebody in the district attorney's office, probably somebody not familiar with law enforcement, not familiar with canines, and let's face it, probably just out of law school, was adamant that every officer on scene had to do a report. So every officer submitted a report, every officer submitted body camera footage except Officer Peaches, because Officer Peaches is incapable of reading, writing, speaking. So as a joke that kind of backfired and got somebody up in their feelings, Peach's human partner wrote something to the effect of saw bad guy ran, I bite, good Peaches, and then used a paw print stamp to sign the report. Absolutely hilarious. Everybody in law enforcement got a huge kick out of that. Not so sure that the district attorney's office, but you talk about malicious compliance. So yes, they are recognized as law enforcement officers. Now, obviously, they're not given the same latitude, and it's only been probably in the last 4 or 5 years that the penalties for resisting a canine, deliberately trying to harm a canine or any working animal, which in America, there's usually only two that I'm aware of. I mean, Florida might train dolphins. I don't know. It hasn't worked out for their football team, so I don't know. But anyway, you've got dogs and you've got horses. You got mounted patrol, and canines are probably the most versatile because canines, they do narcotics detection, they do search and rescue, they do therapy, they do bomb detection, cadaver dogs. You've got all these different areas that these canines serve, and so when these dogs are harmed in the line of duty, it's only been recently that the penalties for that have been upgraded. And I'm going to, in the video, I'm going to post the Texas statute on causing harm to a canine officer or harassing or abusing any police service animal. So if I resist, I'm screwed, just like fighting a cop. I don't do that. Law-abiding working citizen here. Having said that, Derek, what is your take on a canine dying from being in a locked car? Okay. So one of the officers I graduated the police academy with became a canine handler. And a lot of times people get into handling canines and they don't realize that it's not you work your 8, your 10, your 12 and you're done. You pick up you pick up your dog the next time you come on shift. That's not the way these things work. When you become a canine officer, you're taking on a 24/7 responsibility. And I was very fortunate that my first law enforcement partner and my field training officer, gentleman named Wes, he was a canine handler. And in fact, in our part of the country, his dog Radar set the standard for canine training, continuing training, searches. I mean, and Radar was a fantastic dog. I was crushed when I found out about Radar, and so Wes, I can only imagine how you and your wife felt. Wes had raised him from a pup, and Radar was just a typical golden lab. Like, never knew a stranger, very friendly, very, very outgoing. But Wes always had a great deal of control over Radar and was very careful about who got to be around Radar, and he pretty much limited that to his friends, his family, and the people that worked in the sheriff's office. Outside of that, not a whole lot of people had contact with Radar because he was a working dog. And when I was excuse me, when I was working with Wes, I was very curious about becoming a canine officer. I had 2 dogs at the time, and my dog Hunter, because of his size and everything, I thought, he'd be a great dual purpose dog. But Wes informed me about something I hadn't thought of. The way that my dogs are trained to be aggressive. And Hunter had been aggressive twice in the 14 years that I had him. So that just wasn't him. Hunter was better suited to just being a soothing influence. And in fact, I used him one time while interviewing a young child about a very traumatic incident. And I told him that he could just talk to Hunter about it. And, he just threw his arms around that big old neck of Hunter's and just buried his head in Hunter's chest. And Hunter just sat there. He was awesome. Now, Nala, my little female, I still have her. She's getting up there in years too. She's my little meth lab. And she has the exact same amount of energy today that she did when I got her back in 2012. She still has that puppy energy that's never left. Now, Wes saw something in Nala that he was like, you could do something with her. Said, I bet she'd be a good, I bet she'd be good at finding narcotics. And so we tried her out, gave her a few test runs, kind of walked her through what we were doing, and we found out that she is very much an active alert dog. And an active alert dog will tear a vehicle apart to show their handler exactly where the drugs are. A passive alert dog will sit, will put a paw on the vehicle or touch their nose to a part of the vehicle. Nala, she will tear that thing down to the frame. All right. You could just as easily put her to work in a chop shop. She will tear that thing apart. But in learning more and more about canines, I always noticed that if the road conditions were bad, Wes didn't take radar out. Unless it was an absolute emergency, radar didn't go out. If the heat was too bad, radar did not come out. And if Wes had to be inside for a prolonged amount of time, radar came out with him. And part of that just shows Wes's dedication to having a partner. Wes never viewed any of his working dogs as tools. They were always partners, and so he always treated them like partners. And he always had the forethought to think ahead. That being said, dogs being lost, canine officers being lost to heat-related issues, whether they're left in a car, whether they're left in a kennel, those type of things. What I can tell you about that is there's no malicious intent behind it. What there is a lack of planning, a lack of understanding, and worse yet, an over-reliance on technology. A lot of your new canine-equipped vehicles have thermal sensors that will turn the vehicle on, will roll down the windows, will do all these things if the temperature gets over a certain amount. All right. Well, even if it's 85 degrees outside, what's the temperature inside that vehicle? It's easily 15 degrees warmer. So those are things that people don't think about, and a lot of times they leave their partners in the vehicle. Usually that happens with dual purpose dogs who are bite trained, who are search trained, drug trained, what have you. They're usually dual purpose dogs, and they want to limit, the trainers, the handlers, they want to limit the amount of contact that these canines have with the general public, and for good reason. Unfortunately, technology fails. And those things that we rely on to keep our canine partners safe, they fail as well. And I think that's where a lot of these things come from. And Larry, you asked the question about what happens to these officers. Well, and you suggested that voluntary manslaughter be the charge. Well, here's the problem with that. Okay. You need two things to commit a crime. Okay. You need what's called the mens rea, which is the guilty mind. And that's established by the legal standards of intentionally or purposely, depending on the jurisdiction, knowingly, recklessly, or with criminal negligence, you commit a crime or allow a crime to be committed. Okay. And in order to do that, you also have to have the crime that's occurred. So in a lot of these cases, when these animals die, it's a matter of negligence, but not criminal negligence. And a lot of times these officers, they're suspended, they're taken off canine handling duty, they're not allowed, they lose their canine certification. And if you lose those things, getting them back is a nightmare. Um, the the biggest issue there is determining whether an officer intentionally was trying to cause harm to this animal. And that's where things get difficult. Now, that being said, Larry, I will agree with you that canine officers, they have a higher level of training, they should have a higher level of understanding, and they should have a better awareness about environmental factors that could affect their canine partner. Not trying to speak for Wes, but I'm knowing Wes as well as I do. I can promise you he has very little tolerance for officers who do not make their canine a part of their daily routine. Um, Radar always ate breakfast with Wes. He ate lunch with Wes. Um, if he was going to be inside anywhere for a long period of time, Radar came with him. Uh, Wes always just maintained a great awareness of where Radar was, and if Wes didn't know where Radar was, I did, because Radar and I were buddies. And but to jump straight to voluntary manslaughter and stuff like that, you can't really make that connection. Now, this has cost officers their job. It has cost them a lot of money, because you think about it. To train a dog like this, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars or more. And the cost of a canine is not merely acquiring the dog and doing the training. You have to have a facility for him. You have to have a kennel. You have to have, food, water, vet visits. Okay, that wasn't nearly as complicated as I thought it was going to be. Sometimes I have a trouble with alliteration and onomatopoeias. So, but with the canines, there's so many different things that you have to think about that a lot of people just don't. And so when it comes down to it, these officers do face charges, but or face disciplinary action, not charges. But they usually don't face criminal charges unless you can, as somebody on scene, or they have a documented history of being abusive or handling the animal in a dangerous manner. Okay, so you've got to be really careful about that. Now, I know a few officers who have lost animals just tragically. Couple to heat, one to an assault by a suspect, and another one was hit by a vehicle while doing his job. And when these officers lost those animals in that very tragic way, they didn't even bother waiting for disciplinary to clear them or anything. They just turned in their canine stuff and credentials and just said, you know what, I'm done, because it's hard. As a police officer, there's nothing worse than losing a partner. And when that partner is somebody you rely on, you count on, and they're taken away from you, to a good police officer, to a good canine handler, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it was just a dog. It doesn't matter it was just a horse. It doesn't matter that your partner wasn't the sharpest crayon in the tool shed. A lot of mixed metaphors in that one. I get it, but you also have to understand that when law enforcement partners work well together, magic happens. Great things happen. They trust each other. They know each other's moves. It's been several years since Wes and I worked together, but I promise you, if you dropped us off at a house, gave us a scenario, and told us to go get the bad guys, we'd look at each other for about 3 seconds. We'd know exactly what we're doing, and boom, we'd be right back on it. Just because he knows how I work, I know how he works. And good canine officers are the same way. So you have to be really careful about establishing what the intent behind the animal's death or mistreatment is. If it's a technology issue, if it's a technology failure, then you have a policy issue that goes back to the officer not going and not checking on the animal. Now, that being said, there are a lot of canine handlers in the United States right now, and I'm sure it's probably like that worldwide. But they get into being a canine handler for all the wrong reasons. They want the prestige that comes from being a canine handler. They want the extra hours of training that come from being a canine handler. They want to be the go-to individual that's called. My experience is that the good canine handlers are few and far between, because the good canine handlers are always out working. They're always out doing something. You know, anytime Wes brought Radar out of the truck, it was either for a bathroom break, it was to eat or get water, or it was to train. But it was work or train. And because of Radar's enjoyment of finding things, he loved to go out and he loved to work. So to him, it was playtime. And Wes made that very clear, that he always wanted Radar searching to be fun. But you have these officers who they don't go out and they don't do anything because they're canine officers. And these canine officers, you know, they have to be ready to respond. You know, a suspect could get away from an officer, and you know, I need to be available so that my dog can go find the suspect or any of that stuff. And as a result, they use being a canine officer as a poor excuse not to do anything. The good ones, though, they're the ones who are always out there. They are always working. They have a drive that matches their dog. If their dog is any good, a working canine officer should have the most traffic stops, the most arrest, the most clearance, the most cleared cases, because they have a drive. They have a drive like their dogs have a drive. And you know, nothing ruins a good canine worse than a bad handler. And nothing brings out the best in a canine handler like a good dog who just wants to please. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about. Larry, I totally see where you're going with on the voluntary manslaughter. And in a perfect world where you hold people accountable, I'd have a really hard time fighting you on that. But with the legal system, the way it's set up right now, you've got to have the mens rea, you have to have the actus reus. So the mens rea, the guilty mind, the intent to commit the crime, and then you have to have the crime itself. You have to actually have the criminal action, because if you don't have those, it doesn't exist. I would like to see canine officer deaths investigated, especially if the death is caused or traced back to the handler, because I know of one case that was really, really suspicious. And without going into too much detail, the handler said that the dog turned on him, and to protect himself and his family, he shot the dog. And I'm calling BS on that. All right. The individual was a mediocre police officer on his best day, and his dog was not as well trained as he liked everybody to think it was. And so I think that in something like that, I would love to see an actual investigation done, and if wrongdoing is found, strip that individual not only of their canine handling privileges, but strip them of their peace officer license. So anyway, Larry, I hope that kind of puts things into a little more perspective on why that doesn't happen. I'm pretty much in agreement with you that it probably should. But those are the hurdles to get over. So Larry, I hope you enjoyed this video. Y'all be safe. Enjoy the day. If you're here in America, take a second to think about what this day actually means. Think about the cost in human life that has been paid so that we are afforded the honor to live here. And y'all, if you don't live in America, it'd be really hard to explain. And for my friends over in the United Kingdom, we still love you. Anyway, I'm Derek Judd for Cowboy Criminology. Y'all take care. Be safe. And we'll talk to you next time.